The hallway lights flickered once, just once, as if the school itself hesitated to witness what was about to happen. Then came the sound, a sharp, wet rip that cut through the morning chatter like a knife through silk. Every phone in Riverside Comprehensive snapped upward in perfect unison. In the center of the corridor stood a girl no one had ever truly seen before, clutching the shredded remains of a white cotton dress to her chest, her pale shoulders trembling, her copper-red hair spilling loose from its careful plait. Around her, 3 boys from year 13 towered, laughing, the tallest still holding the torn strip of fabric like a trophy. The crowd formed its usual ring, hungry for humiliation. Someone started filming. Someone else whispered the words that would haunt them for years. "She's the quiet new girl. She won't do anything." But the new girl's eyes, green as bottle glass held to sunlight, lifted slowly. And in that single heartbeat, the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 5 degrees. My name is Narrator, and this is the story of how one shy girl from a tiny Welsh valley turned an entire school upside down in under 90 seconds. How 3 bullies learned the difference between confidence and consequence, and how a secret buried for 8 years exploded into the open on an ordinary Tuesday morning in October. Let's go back 3 weeks, to the day Eira Gwyn arrived at Riverside. She stepped off the coach with a single duffel bag and the kind of stillness that makes people nervous. 16 years old, slight build, freckles across her nose like scattered cinnamon, and a habit of looking at the floor when anyone spoke to her. Teachers marked her down as painfully shy. Classmates barely marked her at all. She sat alone at lunch, sketching mountain ranges in the margins of her geography book, speaking only when spoken to, and even then in the softest Cardiff Valley lilt you ever heard. Rumors circled like lazy gulls. Foster kid, maybe mum in prison, maybe ran away from something, definitely. No one asked her directly. No one ever does with the quiet ones. What nobody knew, what nobody could have known, was that Eira had not come to Riverside by choice. She had been sent here, hidden here, after what happened back home. The official record called it an incident. The local paper in her valley had called it something far worse. 8 years ago, when Eira was 8, she had watched her father, a former Royal Marine turned dojo sensei, put 3 grown men in hospital with nothing but his hands and a refusal to let them hurt his daughter. The courts had praised his restraint. The tabloids had branded him a monster. Overnight, the Gwyn family became untouchable. Sponsors vanished. Students stopped coming to the dojo. Within a year, cancer took her father anyway. But the damage was done. Her mother, broken by grief and whispers, signed the papers that sent Eira to live with an aunt in England, far from the valleys, far from the legacy, far from the art that now lived in her bones whether she wanted it or not. Eira had made a promise on her father's grave: never again. No fighting. No attention. No reminders of what she was capable of. She would keep her head down, get her GCSEs, and disappear into ordinary life. For 3 weeks she had kept that promise perfectly, until the morning they tore her dress. It started small, the way these things always do. Jake Harrison's captain of the rugby team and self-crowned king of year 13 had noticed the way Eira walked past the common room every day at 18:27 exactly. Eyes on the floor, earbuds in, but no music playing, just a shield. He noticed because predators always notice the ones who look like they won't fight back. On the Tuesday in question, he was in a foul mood. His girlfriend had dumped him the night before, and there she was, the perfect target. He stepped into her path. She tried to go around. His mates blocked her. Words were said, quiet at first, then louder. Someone flicked her blazer. Someone else tugged her bag. Then Jake reached out, casual as you like, and hooked 2 fingers under the neckline of her dress, the only nice thing she owned, the one her aunt had bought her for the new term, and he yanked. The rip was deafening. The laughter that followed was worse. Phones rose. The circle tightened. Eira stood frozen, arms crossed over herself, cheeks burning scarlet. Jake dangled the torn strip like a flag of victory. "Oops," he sneered. "Looks like someone needs to learn how to dress for school." For one terrible second it looked like the rumors were right. She was going to cry. She was going to run. She was going to be another forgettable victim in another forgettable week. Then something shifted. You could almost hear it, like a gear clicking into place. Eira's shoulders squared, her breathing slowed. The trembling stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. She looked up, not at Jake, but through him, the way her father used to look at opponents twice his size, and when she spoke her voice carried no tremor at all. "Give it back." Jake laughed louder. "Make me? Carrot top." The corridor went quieter than any teacher could ever manage. Because something in the way she said it, something in the absolute absence of fear, made every instinct in the room scream danger. Jake took one step forward, still grinning, still holding the fabric. His mates, Connor and Liam, flanked him, cracking knuckles like they'd seen in films. The crowd leaned in, tasting blood. Eira didn't wait. Her right hand came up, open, relaxed. Jake swung a lazy shove at her shoulder, expecting her to flinch away. Instead, her palm met his wrist mid-motion, redirected the force with a tiny circular twist that looked almost gentle. And suddenly Jake was off balance, stumbling forward. Before he could recover, her left hand had already snapped upward in a perfect huche, the knife edge of her hand striking the vagus nerve cluster just below his ear. Jake's eyes rolled white, his knees buckled. 6'3" of solid rugby muscle hit the lino floor like a sack of cement. The corridor didn't just go quiet, it died. Connor lunged next, roaring something incoherent. Eira pivoted on the ball of her foot, skirt flaring, and drove her elbow into the soft hollow beneath his sternum. Air exploded from his lungs. As he doubled over, her knee rose, not high, just enough, catching him on the point of the chin. Connor joined Jake on the floor, out cold. Liam, to his credit, hesitated half a second. That was half a second too long. Eira stepped inside his reach, caught the sleeve of his blazer, and used his own momentum to spin him face first into the lockers with a textbook irimi. Nage throw her father had made her practice 1,000 times on tatami mats that smelled of sweat and camphor. The clang echoed the length of the school. Liam slid down the metal doors and didn't get up. 90 seconds. Maybe less. The torn strip of white cotton drifted from Jake's limp fingers and settled on the floor like a surrender flag. Eira stood in the sudden silence, chest barely moving, green eyes scanning the circle of stunned faces. Someone's phone clattered to the ground. A girl in year 9 started crying, not from fear but from something that looked a lot like awe. Then, as if waking from a trance, Eira looked down at her ruined dress, at the 3 unconscious boys, at the hundreds of wide eyes fixed on her. The fire in her face drained away, replaced by something raw and 8 years old. She wrapped her arms around herself again, smaller now, and whispered the only thing she could think to say. "I didn't want to." Teachers arrived then, shouting, pushing through the crowd. Deputy Head Mrs. Hargreaves took one look at the scene and went pale beneath her makeup. Someone fetched matron. Someone else fetched the head teacher. The 3 boys were carried to the medical room groaning, sporting concussions, bruised solar plexuses, and, in Liam's case, a dislocated shoulder that would keep him out of the rugby season he'd been bragging about for months. Eira was taken to the head's office, still clutching the shreds of her dress, still barefoot because one of her shoes had come off during the throw. She sat on the plastic chair opposite Mr. Patel's desk and waited for the punishment she was certain would follow. Expulsion. Police. Headlines all over again. Instead, Mr. Patel closed the door, sat down heavily, and for a long time said nothing at all. Finally, he pushed a box of tissues across the desk. Not because she was crying, she wasn't, but because he didn't know what else to do. "Miss Gwyn," he said at last, voice soft, "would you like to tell me what just happened?" She told him. Not everything, not the years on the mats, not the night she'd cried herself to sleep promising never to use it again, but enough. When she finished, Mr. Patel stared at the grainy CCTV stills the caretaker had printed off. 3 frames showing a slight red-haired girl dropping 3 larger boys like marionettes with their strings cut, and he did something no one expected. He believed her. By lunchtime the video was everywhere, not just in Riverside, everywhere. Someone had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Quiet girl ends 3 bullies in 4K. By the time the final bell rang, it had 3 million views. National news picked it up by 6. By 9 o'clock that night, Ferrid Valkyrie was trending worldwide, and Eira Gwyn, the girl who wanted nothing more than to disappear, became the most famous 16-year-old in Britain. The fallout was chaos wrapped in paperwork. Jake's parents threatened lawsuits until the CCTV proved their son had assaulted her first. The school governors held an emergency meeting and decided, in the end, to do the one thing that made sense: nothing. No expulsion, no charges. Just a quiet assembly the following Monday where Mr. Patel stood at the lectern and told the entire school that violence was never the answer, except, he added carefully, when it was the only answer left. He didn't look at Eira when he said it, but everyone else did. Offers flooded in. Self-defense academies wanted her as an instructor. A literary agent wanted her memoir before she'd even sat her mocks. A Premier League rugby club, ironically, offered the boys counseling and a stern warning, then quietly paid Eira's aunt for a new dress, 10 of them, actually, in every color, delivered in discreet brown boxes. But the real change happened in the corridors. The shy new girl still walked to form room at 80-7 every morning, but now the seas parted without her having to look up. Year 7s trailed her like ducklings. Girls who'd never spoken to her before asked, timidly, if she could show them how to throw a punch that didn't hurt their knuckles. She always said no gently, then spent her lunchtimes in the gym with the mats the PE department had suddenly found budget for, teaching them how to fall without hurting themselves, how to shout so their voice didn't shake, how to carry themselves like the space they took up mattered. And sometimes, when no one was watching, she would stand alone in the center of the mat, close her eyes, and move through the katas her father had drilled into her before she could spell her own name. The same katas that had saved her once and damned her family and saved her again. 1 year later, almost to the day, Riverside Comprehensive held its first ever anti-bullying showcase. The hall was packed. Parents, governors, local press. On stage, Mr. Patel introduced the guest speaker, a slight girl with copper hair now tied back in a neat braid, wearing the school uniform like armor. She stepped up to the microphone, looked out at a sea of faces that finally saw her, truly saw her, and spoke the words she had rehearsed 100 times in the mirror. My dad used to say the strongest thing you can do is choose not to fight. But sometimes the world doesn't give you that choice. Sometimes it tears your dress in front of everyone you know and dares you to stay quiet. On that day I stopped being quiet. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, because I was done letting them hurt me. She paused, smiled the smallest, saddest smile. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about deciding who you are when the whole world is watching, and still being kind when you don't have to be. The applause was deafening. In the front row sat Jake, Connor, and Liam, older now, quieter, wearing the plain black jizz of the school's new self-defense club. When the clapping died down, they stood, turned to face her and bowed, deep, respectful, the way her father had taught her all those years ago. Eira bowed back, and somewhere in the rafters of that old school hall, if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear a proud Welsh voice whisper across the years, "That's my girl." So, what about you? Have you ever been counted out, written off, pushed until something inside you finally pushed back? Or have you ever been the one doing the pushing and lived to regret it? Drop your story in the comments. No judgment here, just truth. And if this one hit you in the chest the way it hit me telling it, do me a favor, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet doesn't mean weak, and subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the world least expects it. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never, ever underestimate the quiet ones. This has been your narrator. See you in the next frame.